The janitor looked at the private jet for 3 seconds before saying something every engineer missed. Nobody paid attention to Caleb Turner when he said it. In fairness, nobody ever did. At 41 years old, Caleb spent his nights pushing a cleaning cart across one of the most exclusive private aviation facilities in Tennessee. Every evening he swept hangar floors, emptied trash bins, polished glass doors, and disappeared into the background while executives, pilots, and engineers handled what everyone considered important work. Caleb never complained. He had learned long ago that dignity did not require an audience. It only required consistency. On a chilly Monday morning in late October, the massive Hayes Aviation hangar buzzed with unusual tension. Mechanics moved quickly between workstations. Engineers carried tablets and inspection reports. Supervisors spoke in hushed voices near the center of the facility. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Parked beneath bright white lights sat a sleek private jet valued at nearly $60 million. The aircraft belonged to Victoria Hayes, founder and chief executive officer of Hayes Aviation. Known throughout the industry for her discipline and high standards, Victoria rarely tolerated mistakes. Unfortunately, that morning, her most important aircraft had just failed a critical inspection. The failure could not have come at a worse time. A major international contract depended on that jet being cleared for operation within days. Delays could cost millions. Reputation could suffer. Competitors were already waiting for an opportunity to take advantage of any weakness. Across the hangar floor, conversations became increasingly tense. Run the diagnostics again. We already did. Check the system logs. Nothing abnormal appears. Then why did it fail? Nobody seemed to have an answer. Caleb quietly pushed his cleaning cart nearby while listening without appearing to listen. Years of working around aircraft had taught him how to become invisible. People spoke freely when they believed nobody important was nearby. He glanced toward the inspection report resting on a workbench, then toward the aircraft, then back toward the engineers. Something felt off. Not impossible, just off. As he continued sweeping near the landing gear area, 2 senior engineers walked past. The inspection software flagged a fault sequence. But we cannot find the source. Neither can the manufacturer. Caleb paused briefly. His eyes moved toward a section beneath the aircraft. 3 seconds. That was all it took. Then he resumed sweeping. A few moments later, he spoke. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just calmly. That is probably not an engine issue. The engineers stopped walking. One looked at him. The other frowned. For a second, silence settled between them. Then one engineer laughed. Excuse me. Caleb kept sweeping. I said it probably is not the engine. The first engineer crossed his arms. And how would you know that? Caleb smiled politely. Just an observation. The second engineer shook his head. The inspection team spent 12 hours on this aircraft. Caleb nodded. I understand. Then maybe let them handle it. Caleb offered another respectful nod. Of course. The engineers walked away. Their laughter lingered longer than the conversation. Nearby mechanics exchanged amused looks. Nobody appeared angry. Nobody appeared cruel. They simply saw a janitor speaking about problems reserved for experts. The social order of the hangar felt obvious to everyone except Caleb. He returned to work without saying another word. Several hours later, a black luxury vehicle arrived outside the facility. Employees immediately straightened their posture. Conversations quieted. Victoria Hayes had arrived. She stepped into the hangar with the confidence of someone accustomed to carrying enormous responsibility. Tall, composed, and sharply dressed, she moved quickly toward the inspection team. Within minutes, reports covered a nearby conference table. Questions followed. Answers did not. Caleb continued mopping a section of polished flooring 30 feet away. Invisible again. Yet while executives debated possibilities and engineers reviewed data, his attention remained fixed on the aircraft itself. The more he observed, the more certain he became. Something important was being overlooked. By late afternoon, frustration filled the hangar. Nobody had solved the problem. The aircraft remained grounded. Deadlines approached. Pressure increased. As employees gradually headed home, Caleb finished cleaning near the jet. Before leaving, he glanced one final time toward the inspection report left temporarily unattended on the workbench. He did not touch it. He did not need to. One brief look was enough. Then he quietly gathered his supplies and headed toward the exit. Outside, The Tennessee sky glowed orange beneath the setting sun. His daughter Lily would be waiting at home. Dinner needed to be made. Homework needed attention. Life continued. Yet as Caleb walked across the parking lot, he could not shake a strange feeling. Inside that hangar, everyone was searching for the wrong problem. And if he was right, the truth was about to change everything. The next morning began exactly the way most mornings did for Caleb Turner. Before sunrise, he prepared breakfast for Lily, helped her organize her school materials, and listened patiently as she described a science project she was excited about. Their small home carried the warmth of routine. Nothing expensive, nothing extraordinary, just the quiet rhythm of two people who depended on each other. As Lily finished her orange juice, she noticed something different. Caleb seemed distracted. "You are thinking about work." Caleb smiled. "Am I that obvious?" Lily nodded. "Only when you stare at the toaster for 10 seconds. That answer made him laugh. "Maybe I am thinking about work a little." Lily tilted her head. "The airplane." Caleb nodded. "The airplane." She studied him carefully. "You think you know what is wrong with it." Caleb reached for his coffee. "Maybe." "Did you tell them?" "Sort of." Lily already knew what that meant. "And they did not listen." Caleb shrugged. "They have their reasons." Lily frowned. "Just because you clean floors does not mean you are wrong." Caleb smiled again. Sometimes children reach truths adults complicated unnecessarily. By 8 o'clock, he was back at Hayes Aviation. The atmosphere inside the hangar felt even more tense than the day before. Additional inspectors had arrived. New reports covered conference tables. Engineers moved quickly between laptops and diagnostic stations. The aircraft remained grounded. Every passing hour increased pressure on everyone involved. Caleb quietly began his work. Sweep, mop, empty bins, polish surfaces. The same routine that made him nearly invisible. Yet as he moved through the facility, fragments of conversation reached him. The software shows no abnormalities. The manufacturer reviewed the data. We still cannot explain the failure. Victoria wants answers by tonight. Nobody seemed any closer to solving the mystery. Around mid-morning, Caleb pushed his cleaning cart near a temporary engineering station. Several specialists stood around a digital display reviewing inspection data. One pointed toward a chart. "The issue has to originate here." Another shook his head. "Then why do the readings remain stable?" A third engineer rubbed his forehead. "Nothing about this makes sense." Caleb glanced at the display for less than 5 seconds. Then he continued walking. But one detail immediately caught his attention. Not because it was obvious, because it was subtle. The kind of detail most people overlook when focusing on larger systems. He kept moving. He said nothing. Yet confidence continued growing inside him. During lunch, Caleb sat alone in a small employee break room. He preferred quiet. It gave him time to think. Unfortunately, quiet did not last long. 2 mechanics entered carrying sandwiches. They immediately recognized him. One smiled. "Hey, airplane expert." The other laughed. "Figure out the problem yet?" Their tone was playful rather than cruel, but the message remained clear. Caleb smiled politely. "Not officially." The first mechanic sat down. "You know what I like about you?" Caleb looked surprised. "What?" "Confidence." The second mechanic chuckled. "Most janitors do not diagnose private jets between mopping floors." Caleb laughed softly. "Most janitors probably have better things to do." That answer earned a few smiles. Yet beneath the humor, the social boundaries remained intact. In their minds, expertise belonged to engineers. Authority belonged to executives. Cleaning belonged to Caleb. Categories simplified life. People rarely questioned them. Later that afternoon, Victoria Hayes walked through the hangar once again. Her expression revealed growing concern. Meetings had produced no solution. Reports had produced no solution. Additional inspections had produced no solution. Everywhere she looked, uncertainty remained. As she passed nearby, Caleb briefly noticed something most employees missed. Beneath her confidence existed exhaustion. Responsibility carried weight, especially when hundreds of employees depended on decisions made at the top. For a moment, he almost felt sorry for her. Near closing time, another meeting gathered around the aircraft. Engineers reviewed their findings one final time. Conclusions remained frustratingly vague. Victoria listened patiently before finally asking a simple question. "Does anyone have a new idea?" Silence followed. Not because people lacked intelligence, because they had exhausted every path they could see. Caleb stood 30 feet away holding a mop. The question hung in the air. For several seconds, nobody answered. Then one engineer glanced toward him and smirked. Maybe ask the janitor. A few people laughed. Victoria did not. She simply looked toward Caleb for the first time. Really looked. Not at the uniform. Not at the cleaning cart. At the man himself. Caleb lowered his eyes respectfully and continued working. The moment passed. The meeting resumed. Yet something unexpected had happened. For the first time, Victoria Hayes noticed him. And somewhere beneath the noise of reports, deadlines, and technical debates, the quiet single father pushing a mop across the hangar floor had just become impossible to completely ignore. That evening, Caleb Turner arrived home carrying groceries in one hand and a tired smile on his face. The small house smelled like tomato soup. Lily sat at the kitchen table surrounded by notebooks, pencils, and half-finished homework assignments. She looked up immediately. Did they fix the airplane? Caleb placed the grocery bags on the counter. Not yet. Lily frowned. Still. Caleb nodded. Still. She shook her head. That must be frustrating. Caleb smiled. For them, probably. Lily studied him carefully. You know what is wrong, do not you? Caleb paused for a moment. Then he opened the refrigerator and quietly answered. I think I do. Lily was old enough to recognize when her father chose words carefully. Then why did not you tell them? Caleb closed the refrigerator door and leaned against the counter. Outside, evening sunlight painted long shadows across the backyard. The house felt peaceful, safe, honest. Because sometimes people need to be ready to hear something before it matters. Lily considered that. That sounds complicated. Caleb laughed softly. Life usually is. Later that night, after dinner and homework, Lily disappeared into the hallway closet searching for materials for a school project. The closet contained old storage boxes that Caleb rarely opened. Most held ordinary things. Winter decorations, family photographs, forgotten household items. But one dusty box caught her attention. It was heavier than the others. Curious, she carried it into the living room. Dad, Caleb looked up from a book. What did you find? Lily opened the lid. Both of them froze. Inside sat dozens of notebooks. Technical notebooks. Detailed sketches covered page after page. Aircraft diagrams. Engineering calculations. Complex system layouts. Precision notes written in Caleb's handwriting. Lily blinked several times. What is all this? Caleb stared silently at the box. For a brief moment, emotions crossed his face that Lily rarely saw. Memories. Regret. Pride. Loss. Finally, he sat beside her. Those are from a long time ago. Lily carefully lifted one notebook. You drew all of this? Caleb nodded. She flipped through another. Then another. Every page revealed sophisticated engineering work. Nothing looked amateur. Nothing looked ordinary. Lily's eyes widened. Dad, Caleb smiled faintly. Yes. Why do you have hundreds of airplane designs? Silence settled across the room. The answer carried years of history. History Caleb rarely discussed. He looked toward an old framed photograph resting on a nearby shelf. A photograph taken many years earlier. Before everything changed. Before life became smaller and simpler. Before responsibility forced difficult choices. Because I used to work with aircraft. Lily laughed. Work with aircraft? She held up a notebook filled with advanced technical drawings. This does not look like work. This looks like genius. Caleb shook his head. No, just experience. Lily was unconvinced. She opened another notebook and stopped suddenly. Inside sat an old identification badge. The photograph showed a younger version of Caleb wearing a professional engineering uniform. The title beneath his name made her eyes widen. Senior Aerospace Systems Engineer. Lily looked up slowly. You were an engineer? Caleb nodded. A long time ago. Senior engineer? Another nod. At an aerospace company? Caleb smiled. Among other places. Lily sat speechless. The discovery felt impossible. Her father cleaned floors at an airport. Her father packed school lunches. Her father fixed neighbors' lawn mowers and repaired leaking sinks. Yet hidden inside a forgotten storage box existed an entirely different version of him. Why did you stop? She finally asked. Caleb's expression softened. He looked toward the photograph again. Because some things became more important. Lily already knew what he meant. Years earlier, after difficult family circumstances changed everything, Caleb had chosen stability over ambition, presence over prestige, parenthood over career advancement. He never described it as sacrifice. He described it as responsibility. Yet for the first time, Lily began understanding the size of that choice. The following morning, Caleb returned to Hayes Aviation. Nothing appeared different. The aircraft remained grounded. Engineers remained frustrated. Executives remained concerned. Yet something had changed. Not inside the hangar. Inside the story. Because while everyone continued seeing a janitor pushing a cleaning cart across polished floors, a secret had quietly emerged. And somewhere inside a box of forgotten notebooks, the truth waited patiently. The man cleaning the hangar understood the aircraft better than anyone suspected. He simply had not told them yet. By Thursday morning, pressure had spread through Hayes Aviation like an approaching storm. Every department felt it. Pilots adjusted schedules. Managers delayed meetings. Engineers worked through lunch breaks. The grounded aircraft had become more than a technical problem. It had become a business crisis. Caleb Turner noticed the change immediately. Tension revealed itself in small ways. People walked faster. Conversations became shorter. Coffee disappeared from break rooms more quickly than usual. Nobody smiled much anymore. The private jet remained parked beneath the center lights of the main hangar, surrounded by equipment, laptops, diagnostic stations, and increasingly frustrated experts. Yet despite days of effort, the answer remained hidden. Around mid-morning, a high-level meeting gathered inside a glass conference room overlooking the hangar floor. Victoria Hayes stood at the head of the table while senior executives reviewed reports. Through the transparent walls, Caleb could see expressions growing more serious by the minute. Although he could not hear every word, certain phrases carried through the glass when voices rose. Contract deadline. Financial exposure. Client confidence. Operational risk. None sounded encouraging. Victoria listened carefully. Unlike many executives, she did not interrupt. She absorbed information first. Then she made decisions. Yet even from a distance, Caleb could see exhaustion forming beneath her composed exterior. Responsibility had a way of showing itself around the eyes. Several hours later, the meeting ended. Executives exited one by one, carrying tablets and folders. Nobody looked satisfied. Victoria remained behind alone for several minutes. She stood at the conference room window staring directly at the aircraft. The hangar lights reflected softly across the glass. For a brief moment, she looked less like a powerful chief executive officer and more like someone carrying a burden nobody else fully understood. Caleb quietly continued polishing a nearby corridor. Eventually, Victoria stepped back onto the hangar floor. Almost immediately, engineers approached with fresh updates. None provided solutions, only possibilities. More theories, more uncertainty. We are testing another sequence. We are reviewing manufacturer records. We are comparing historical data. Victoria nodded patiently, yet frustration slowly appeared beneath her professionalism. Days continued passing while the aircraft remained grounded. Nearby, Caleb pushed his cleaning cart toward a maintenance station where several engineers reviewed inspection logs. One pointed toward a series of numbers displayed on a large screen. The readings make no sense. Another shook his head. Everything looks normal. Exactly. That is the problem. Caleb glanced briefly toward the display. Again, the same detail appeared. The same inconsistency. The same overlooked clue. It practically shouted at him now. Yet nobody seemed to notice. He continued walking. During the afternoon, Lily called him during a school break. Her excitement immediately brightened his day. "Did you tell them yet?" she asked. Caleb smiled. "Tell who what? You know exactly what I mean." Caleb laughed softly. "No." Lily groaned dramatically. "Dad, what? You are impossible." Caleb leaned against a quiet wall near the service corridor. "Maybe they will figure it out." Lily answered instantly. "And if they do not?" Caleb looked across the hangar toward the aircraft. Engineers surrounded it. Executives watched it. Millions of dollars depended on it. Yet nobody seemed to be asking the right question. "Then we will see." That evening brought another unexpected development. A specialized consulting engineer arrived from Atlanta. His reputation was impressive. His credentials filled several pages. Employees greeted him almost like a celebrity. If anyone could solve the problem, surely he could. For nearly 3 hours, he studied reports, reviewed diagnostics, and examined inspection data. The entire hangar seemed to hold its breath. Finally, he gathered everyone together. Victoria stood nearby waiting. Engineers watched carefully. Managers exchanged hopeful looks. The consultant cleared his throat. I have identified several possibilities. Excitement immediately spread through the room. Then came the next sentence. Unfortunately, I cannot confirm any of them. Silence followed. Hope vanished almost instantly. The consultant looked genuinely disappointed. The failure pattern does not align with any known explanation. Across the room, shoulders dropped. Frustration returned. Victoria thanked him professionally, but the setback hit hard. As employees gradually dispersed, Caleb quietly returned to work. Yet this time something different happened. Victoria noticed him again. He was standing alone near the aircraft, looking toward one specific section beneath the fuselage. Not touching anything, simply observing. For several seconds she watched him. Then she noticed something unusual. Unlike everyone else in the hangar, he did not look confused. He looked certain. The realization lasted only a moment before she turned away. Yet the image stayed with her. Because for the first time since the crisis began, the only person who seemed completely calm was the janitor. Friday arrived with cold rain tapping softly against the massive hangar doors. The weather matched the mood inside Hayes Aviation. Another day had passed. Another deadline had moved closer. Yet the aircraft remained grounded. Caleb Turner pushed his cleaning cart through the main maintenance bay, while engineers gathered around digital displays reviewing new diagnostic results. Nobody looked optimistic anymore. The confidence present at the beginning of the week had gradually disappeared. In its place stood frustration, exhaustion, and uncertainty. Around 10 o'clock that morning, a technical review meeting was held directly beside the aircraft. Victoria Hayes attended personally. So did department managers, senior engineers, inspectors, and consultants. Everyone hoped fresh discussion might reveal something overlooked. Caleb quietly cleaned nearby windows while the meeting unfolded. The software reports remain consistent. The inspection sequence remains unchanged. All major systems pass independent testing. Then why does the aircraft continue failing? Nobody answered. The question lingered in the air. One engineer finally pointed toward a complicated diagram displayed on a large monitor. The problem must originate somewhere within this chain. Another shook his head, then explained why the readings remained stable before failure. A third specialist frowned. That is exactly what we cannot explain. For several minutes, the debate continued. Theories collided. Possibilities emerged, then disappeared. Nothing fit perfectly. Nothing explained every symptom. Caleb listened quietly while polishing glass. Then one engineer asked a question that changed everything. If the readings are stable, what mechanism could create a false failure pattern without triggering additional alerts? Silence followed. Not a few seconds. Nearly half a minute. Nobody answered. Experts stared at screens. Consultants reviewed notes. Managers waited. Even Victoria remained silent. The question seemed simple, yet no solution appeared. Caleb looked up instinctively. Before he could stop himself, he spoke. Signal synchronization drift. The words escaped naturally, almost casually, as though he were discussing weather. Instantly, the entire conversation stopped. Every head turned toward him. The silence that followed felt enormous. Caleb froze. He immediately realized what had happened. One engineer blinked. What did you say? Caleb lowered the cloth in his hand. Signal synchronization drift. Nobody spoke. Another engineer stepped forward. Why? Caleb hesitated. For a moment, years of habit urged him to remain quiet. Stay invisible. Keep cleaning. Avoid attention. But the question had already been asked. Victoria watched him carefully. Not with amusement. Not with skepticism. With curiosity. Finally, Caleb answered. Because stable readings do not guarantee synchronized timing. If the timing sequence drifts beyond tolerance, the system can interpret normal behavior as a failure event. Silence returned. Yet this silence felt different. Engineers exchanged looks. One consultant immediately grabbed a tablet. Another pulled up system architecture diagrams. A third reviewed inspection logs. Suddenly the room moved. Fast. The engineer who originally asked the question looked at Caleb again. How long have you been thinking that? Caleb offered a small smile. A few days. The answer generated another stunned silence. Several minutes passed while specialists examined the possibility. Then one consultant straightened abruptly. Wait. Everyone looked up. He pointed toward a section of the data. There is evidence of timing drift. Another engineer leaned closer. Very small. But it is there. More analysis followed. More calculations. More reviews. Excitement slowly replaced frustration. For the first time all week, a theory actually fit the evidence. Victoria crossed her arms and watched everything unfold. Yet her attention kept returning to Caleb. He had already resumed cleaning, as though none of this involved him, as though he had not just redirected the entire investigation. Eventually, one engineer approached him directly. "Where did you learn that?" Caleb continued, wiping the window. "Learn what?" "Signal synchronization drift." Caleb smiled faintly. "I have been around aircraft for a while." The engineer laughed nervously. "That answer is not even remotely sufficient." Nearby employees began whispering. The janitor had identified something dozens of specialists missed. Nobody knew what to do with that information. It did not fit expectations. It did not fit assumptions. It did not fit the role assigned to him. Victoria finally stepped forward. The hangar grew quiet again. She stopped several feet away from Caleb. "Mr. Turner." Caleb turned respectfully. "Yes, ma'am." Victoria studied him for a moment. Her expression remained calm, professional, yet something had changed. For the first time, she was not looking at a janitor. She was looking at a mystery. "I think we need to talk." Across the hangar floor, engineers continued investigating the new lead. Conversations accelerated. Hope returned. And while nobody knew it yet, a door had just opened. Because the question was no longer what was wrong with the aircraft. The question had become something much more interesting. Who exactly was Caleb Turner? The conversation took place in a small office overlooking the hangar. Rain continued tapping softly against the windows while aircraft lights reflected across the wet tarmac outside. Caleb Turner sat in a chair near the door. Victoria Hayes sat across from him. Between them rested a conference table covered with reports, inspection documents, and technical notes. For several seconds, neither spoke. Victoria studied him carefully. Caleb remained calm. The silence felt strangely balanced. Finally, Victoria broke it. "How long have you worked here?" Caleb smiled faintly. "Almost 4 years." Victoria nodded. "As a janitor?" "Yes." She folded her hands together. "And how does a janitor identify a failure pattern that experienced specialists missed?" Caleb looked toward the rain outside. He had expected this conversation eventually. "Just not today." "Experience," he answered. Victoria almost laughed. "That is the same answer you gave the engineer." Caleb nodded. "It is still true." Victoria leaned back slightly. "Mr. Turner, my company has spent nearly a week trying to solve this problem." Her voice remained professional but direct. "You recognize something important in a matter of seconds." Caleb lowered his eyes briefly. "I have seen similar situations before." The answer only deepened the mystery. Across the hangar, engineers continued analyzing the timing drift theory. Preliminary results looked promising. Very promising. For the first time since the crisis began, progress seemed real. Yet inside the office, Victoria had become interested in something else entirely. She wanted to understand the man sitting across from her. Later that afternoon, the answer arrived unexpectedly. Not through Caleb. Through paperwork. One of the senior engineers had become curious after the morning meeting. Curiosity led to questions. Questions led to personnel records. Personnel records led to an old employment file. When the engineer saw the information, he stared at the screen for nearly a minute before immediately printing several pages. 30 minutes later, those pages rested on Victoria's desk. She read them once, then twice, then a third time, because they seemed impossible. Senior Aerospace Systems Engineer, Advanced Propulsion Specialist, Aviation Research Consultant, Published Technical Contributor, Multiple Industry Awards, Years of High-Level Aerospace Experience. Victoria looked up from the documents in disbelief. The resume described someone who could have led engineering teams anywhere in the country. Yet the name at the top matched the janitor currently polishing floors inside her hangar. By evening, whispers spread throughout the facility. Quiet conversations appeared near workstations. Mechanics exchanged confused looks. Engineers reread employment records. Nobody understood. The question echoed everywhere. Why? Why would someone with that background choose this life? Near closing time, Victoria found Caleb alone near a maintenance corridor. He was organizing cleaning supplies as though nothing unusual had happened. She approached holding the printed documents. Caleb immediately recognized them. His expression changed slightly. Not fear. Not embarrassment. Resignation. "I was wondering when someone would find those." Victoria looked at him carefully. "They are accurate." Caleb nodded. "Yes. You were a senior aerospace engineer." A long time ago. You consulted for major aviation firms. Another nod. You designed aircraft systems. Part of a team. Victoria exhaled slowly. The more answers she received, the more questions appeared. Why are you cleaning floors? For the first time, Caleb did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked across the hangar toward a photograph taped inside his cleaning cart. A photograph of Lily. Victoria followed his gaze. Suddenly something shifted. The answer became obvious before he spoke. My daughter needed me. His voice remained calm, steady, honest. Years ago, life changed unexpectedly. She became my priority. Victoria listened silently. Caleb continued. The jobs I had required constant travel. Long hours. Endless projects. He smiled softly. Being a father required something different. The simplicity of the explanation carried enormous weight. No dramatic speech. No self-pity. No regret. Just a decision. One made years earlier and honored every day since. Victoria looked down at the documents again. Awards. Accomplishments. Promotions. Recognition. Then she looked at the photograph. Suddenly the resume seemed less impressive than the man himself. Across the hangar, engineers suddenly erupted with excitement. Voices echoed through the building. Someone shouted for a supervisor. Another engineer hurried toward the office carrying fresh data. Within moments, the news spread. The timing drift theory was correct. The failure source had finally been identified. Days of confusion ended in an instant. Employees rushed toward workstations. Energy returned. Hope returned. Progress returned. Yet while celebration began across the facility, Victoria remained standing beside Caleb. The aircraft problem had finally been solved. But another truth had just emerged. The quiet man everyone overlooked was not simply knowledgeable. He was extraordinary. And somehow, despite everything he had given up, there was not a trace of bitterness in him. Only dignity. The kind that never needed attention to exist. The atmosphere inside Hayes Aviation transformed almost overnight. By Monday morning, the panic that had consumed the hangar for days had been replaced by cautious optimism. Engineers finally had a confirmed direction. Diagnostic teams worked efficiently. Repair schedules moved forward. For the first time in nearly a week, progress felt real. Yet another change had occurred as well. People looked at Caleb Turner differently now. Not dramatically, not all at once. But the shift was unmistakable. The same employees who once walked past him without notice now greeted him. Engineers nodded respectfully when he entered a room. Mechanics asked questions. Supervisors listened when he spoke. The change felt strange. Caleb had not become a different person. Everyone else had simply learned something new. Early that afternoon, a team of specialists gathered around the aircraft reviewing the final repair sequence. Caleb quietly cleaned nearby as usual. Old habits remained difficult to break. One engineer looked up from a technical diagram and called across the hangar. Mr. Turner, could you take a quick look at something? The request immediately attracted attention. A week earlier, nobody would have imagined such a scene. Caleb paused. You probably do not need me. The engineer smiled. Maybe not, but I would like your opinion. Caleb walked over. Several specialists shifted aside to give him room. Nobody laughed. Nobody smirked. Nobody questioned why he was there. Respect had entered the conversation. Together, they reviewed the timing synchronization data. Caleb studied the information carefully, then pointed toward a specific section. Your correction looks right. Relief spread across several faces immediately. The lead engineer grinned. Good. Another mechanic laughed. That answer just lowered my blood pressure. The group shared a moment of light-hearted laughter. Across the hangar, Victoria Hayes watched everything quietly. She noticed the difference. More importantly, she noticed Caleb's reaction to it. He did not seem proud. He did not seem vindicated. He did not behave like someone finally receiving long overdue recognition. Instead, he behaved exactly the same way he always had. Calm, respectful, focused. The attention changed nothing about him. That realization impressed Victoria more than any resume ever could. Later that evening, after most employees left, a small group remained to complete final testing procedures. The hangar felt quieter, more peaceful. Rain clouds had disappeared, leaving a clear Tennessee sky beyond the open doors. Caleb was preparing to head home when Victoria approached him. Do you have a few minutes? Caleb nodded. Of course. They walked together along the edge of the hangar. Aircraft lights reflected across polished concrete floors. The massive private jet sat surrounded by equipment, nearly ready for another inspection. Victoria folded her arms. I have spent the last few days trying to understand something. Caleb smiled slightly. Only one thing. That answer surprised a laugh out of her. Fair point. For a moment, they simply walked. Then Victoria continued. Most people would have been angry. Caleb glanced toward her. About what? Being overlooked. She paused. Being underestimated. Caleb considered the question. Maybe. Victoria waited. But you were not. Caleb looked across the hangar. Mechanics packed tools. Engineers reviewed final reports. People worked together. Everyone makes assumptions, he said quietly. I do too. Victoria shook her head. Not like this. Caleb smiled. Perhaps. Then he added something that stayed with her. Respect means more when it is given freely. Demanding it never works very well. Silence followed. Not uncomfortable silence. Reflective silence. Victoria realized she was learning something valuable. Not about aircraft. About character. The next morning brought encouraging news. Repair verification tests succeeded. Additional diagnostics confirmed the correction. The timing drift issue appeared fully resolved. Excitement spread through the facility. Employees who had spent days battling uncertainty finally allowed themselves to feel hopeful. Yet the most meaningful moment happened shortly before lunch. Caleb received a visitor. Lily arrived after school carrying a small backpack and a bright smile. She occasionally stopped by when schedules allowed. Several employees recognized her immediately. That must be the famous daughter, one mechanic joked. Lily laughed. I hope not. Caleb introduced her to a few members of the engineering team. The reaction surprised her. People treated her father differently than before. They listened when he spoke. They asked for his opinion. They respected him. As they walked through the hangar together, Lily smiled quietly. They know now. Caleb looked at her. Know what? Who you are. Caleb glanced around the facility, then down at his daughter. A gentle smile crossed his face. No. He placed a hand on her shoulder. They are still figuring that out. And as the final inspection approached, Hayes Aviation prepared for its most important day yet. The aircraft was almost ready. The crisis was almost over. But the deepest lesson inside the hangar had nothing to do with aviation. It was about the quiet strength of a man who never needed recognition to do the right thing. The day of the final inspection arrived beneath clear blue skies and crisp autumn air. Long before sunrise, lights illuminated every corner of the Hayes Aviation hangar. Mechanics arrived early. Engineers carried fresh reports. Supervisors reviewed checklists. The atmosphere felt completely different from the anxiety that had dominated the previous week. Hope had returned. Yet nobody wanted to celebrate too soon. One final inspection remained. One final test would determine whether the aircraft could return to service. Caleb Turner arrived at work carrying the same cleaning cart he had pushed every day for nearly 4 years. Nothing about him appeared different. He still greeted people politely. He still emptied trash bins. He still polished glass and cleaned corridors. Yet the reactions he received had changed dramatically. Employees smiled when they saw him. Engineers nodded respectfully. Several mechanics even asked his opinion about unrelated technical questions. Caleb accepted the attention graciously but never encouraged it. The work remained the work. The title remained the title. The man remained the same. Around 9 o'clock, inspectors began the final evaluation process. Teams moved carefully through every required procedure. Systems were tested. Data was reviewed. Verification sequences were completed. Throughout the morning, employees gathered near observation areas waiting for updates. Victoria Hayes spent most of her time near the inspection team. Calm on the outside. Concerned on the inside. Too much depended on the outcome. Not just contracts. Not just schedules. Trust. Reputation. Confidence. All of it rested on the result. Shortly after noon, a lead inspector emerged from the aircraft carrying a tablet. Conversations immediately stopped. The hangar became silent. Every eye followed him. He approached Victoria first. They spoke quietly for several moments. Then Victoria looked toward the aircraft. Then toward the employees gathered nearby. A smile slowly appeared. Genuine. Relieved. Grateful. The inspection had passed. For 1 second, silence remained. Then applause erupted across the hangar. Mechanics cheered. Engineers shook hands. Managers laughed with relief. Weeks of pressure disappeared almost instantly. The aircraft was cleared for operation. The crisis was over. Yet as celebration spread through the facility, many eyes drifted toward Caleb. Because everyone understood something important. The breakthrough had begun with him. The answer that changed everything came from the man nobody initially listened to. Victoria understood it too. A few hours later, she gathered employees near the center of the hangar. The aircraft stood behind her beneath bright lights. The atmosphere felt lighter than it had in weeks. She thanked teams individually. Engineers, mechanics, inspectors, support staff. Then she paused. There is one person I would like to recognize specifically. The crowd already knew. Victoria looked toward Caleb. He immediately looked uncomfortable. Several employees smiled. Victoria continued. This company nearly overlooked one of the most valuable people in the building. Silence settled across the room. Respectful silence. Not because he lacked knowledge. Not because he lacked character. Because we allowed titles to shape our assumptions. Caleb lowered his eyes. The attention clearly embarrassed him. Victoria smiled gently. Mr. Turner reminded all of us that wisdom does not always arrive wearing the title we expect. Applause returned. Stronger this time. Longer. Not the applause given to a hero after a dramatic victory. The applause given to someone who quietly earned respect through consistency. Across the room, Lily stood beside several employees who had invited her to witness the inspection. Her eyes filled with pride. Not because people were finally recognizing her father. Because they were finally seeing what she had always known. After the gathering ended, Victoria asked Caleb to join her in the conference room. A folder waited on the table. Caleb immediately suspected what was inside. You are offering me a job. Victoria laughed softly. Was it that obvious? Caleb smiled. A little. She slid the folder across the table. Senior Technical Advisor. Flexible schedule. Excellent compensation. Complete freedom to balance work and family responsibilities. The position had clearly been designed specifically for him. Victoria folded her hands. You would be extraordinary in this role. Caleb looked at the offer quietly, then at the photograph of Lily displayed on his phone, then back at Victoria. He did not answer immediately. The room became silent, thoughtful, reflective, because for the first time in years, a door he believed closed forever had opened again. And now he faced a decision that would shape everything that came next. Caleb Turner did not answer immediately. The job offer remained on the table between him and Victoria Hayes while late afternoon sunlight stretched across the conference room floor. Outside the glass walls, employees continued returning to normal routines. The crisis had passed. The aircraft was flying again. The pressure that had consumed the company for days had finally lifted. Yet for Caleb, the most important decision had nothing to do with airplanes. It never had. He looked at the offer one more time before smiling. May I take a day to think about it? Victoria nodded without hesitation. Of course. Caleb stood and extended his hand. Thank you. Victoria shook it warmly. No, thank you. The following evening, Caleb sat on the back porch with Lily as the sun disappeared beyond the trees behind their home. The air carried the cool scent of autumn leaves. For a while neither spoke. Then Caleb handed her the offer letter. Lily read every page carefully. When she finished, she looked up. This is amazing. Caleb smiled. It is. You are going to take it. Caleb laughed softly. That sounds less like a question. Lily grinned. Because I already know the answer. Caleb leaned back in his chair. Do you? Lily nodded. You always taught me something. What is that? That choosing one thing does not mean losing another. Caleb stared at her for a moment. Then he smiled. Because she was right. Years earlier, he had stepped away from a successful career because his daughter needed him. He never regretted that choice. Not for a second. But perhaps life was offering something unexpected now. Not a return to the past. A new chapter. One built around the values he had protected all along. 2 days later, Caleb returned to Hayes Aviation and walked into Victoria's office. She looked up immediately. I assume you made a decision. Caleb nodded. Then he placed the signed offer letter on her desk. Victoria smiled. Welcome aboard. The role proved exactly what she promised. Flexible, meaningful, balanced. Caleb helped engineering teams solve complex problems, mentored younger specialists, and contributed knowledge earned through years of experience. Yet every afternoon, he still left in time to pick up Lily. Every school event still mattered. Every family dinner remained protected. Success had returned to his life, but not at the expense of the things he valued most. Months passed. Hayes Aviation continued growing. Employees often shared the story of the aircraft that nobody could fix and the quiet man who saw the answer. Yet the version Caleb appreciated most was never about technical expertise. It was about perspective. New employees heard how assumptions almost caused everyone to overlook someone extraordinary. Managers referenced the lesson during leadership meetings. Engineers remembered it whenever a junior team member spoke up. Slowly, the culture changed. Not because of a policy, because of an example. One winter afternoon, Victoria walked through the hangar and found Caleb standing near the aircraft that had started everything. The jet gleamed beneath bright lights, ready for another trip. "Do you ever think about how differently this could have ended?" she asked. Caleb looked at the aircraft and smiled. "Not really." Victoria laughed. "Why not?" Caleb folded his hands behind his back. "Because it ended exactly the way it was supposed to." She considered that answer, then nodded. The hangar around them hummed with quiet activity. Mechanics worked. Engineers collaborated. People greeted each other with respect. The atmosphere felt different now. Better. Victoria looked across the building and finally understood something she had missed for years. The most valuable people were not always the loudest, not always the highest paid, not always the ones with the biggest offices. Sometimes they were the people who showed up every day, did the right thing when nobody noticed, and carried their dignity without needing recognition. As evening settled outside, Caleb gathered his things and headed home. Lily would be waiting. Dinner would be waiting. Life would be waiting. And that was more than enough. Because in the end, he did not receive his greatest reward from a job title, a promotion, or public praise. His greatest reward was already walking beside him through life. The daughter he chose, the family he protected, the values he never abandoned. The hangar lights slowly reflected across the polished floor as the doors closed for the night, and for a brief moment, the entire building seemed to rest in quiet silence. The kind of silence that follows understanding. The kind of silence that follows respect. The kind of silence that follows grace. And if this story reminded you that character matters more than titles, that quiet strength often hides in unexpected places, or that second chances can arrive when we least expect them, share your thoughts below. Stories like these continue because people who believe in dignity, respect, and redemption choose to pass them on.